They made me eat alone in the car on Christmas. My own daughter, after I had driven an hour with her favorite sweet potato pie on the passenger seat, told me there wasn't room at her table. So I sat in my cold car in her driveway watching my family celebrate through the window. That was the moment I remembered the lottery ticket I had bought on a whim. That was the moment my life changed. They had no idea I was holding a $10 million winning ticket. They had no idea that their casual cruelty was about to cost them everything. They thought they were just saving a seat at the table. They were about to find out they had just lost their seat in my life. Before I begin, thank you for being here. For being part of this community. If you believe in the power of a woman finding her voice and reclaiming her dignity, then you are in the right place. Please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It truly means the world to me. Now let me tell you what they did to me. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed, and for 72 years, my life has been a study in discipline, dignity, and the quiet accumulation of a life well lived. I was born in Cape Coast, Ghana, in a house that overlooked the sea, a place where history was not a story in a book, but a presence you could feel in the very stones of the great castle that dominated the shore. I came to America as a young woman on a scholarship, my heart filled with the twin fires of ambition and a deep desire to prove myself. And I did. For 35 years I was the dean of students at Spelman College in Atlanta, a position I held not as a job, but as a sacred trust. I was a mentor, a guide, and sometimes a gentle but firm hand on the tiller for thousands of young black women setting out to make their mark on the world. My life was one of order, intellectual rigor, and the deep, abiding respect of my community. My home, a beautiful paid-off brick house in the historic Collier Heights neighborhood, reflects this. It is not a place of fleeting trends but of timeless elegance. The walls are lined with books, the floors are covered with rugs I brought back from my travels, and the art on the walls tells the story of a life spent appreciating black artists. It is a quiet, orderly sanctuary, the one I shared with my late husband, a history professor, and the one I now inhabit alone. My one great vulnerability, the one area where my keen judgment has always been clouded, is my daughter Brooke. I poured everything into her. A Spelman education, a master's degree from Columbia, the down payment on the sprawling new construction home she now occupies in the affluent suburb of Alpharetta. I gave her a foundation of love, culture, and financial security. She, in turn, has built a life that I struggle to understand, a life of luxury casual aesthetics, curated social media posts, and a constant gnawing anxiety about appearances. Her husband, Mark, a man who works in tech and views the world through a lens of profit and loss, only encourages her worst impulses. Their respect for me, I have noticed, has waned over the years. It has been replaced by a kind of casual, dismissive tolerance. I have become an obligation, a mother, to be checked in on with a perfunctory phone call, a guest to be endured at holidays. I have told myself this is simply the way of the modern world. I have made excuses for their lack of warmth, for their self-absorption. I have chosen to see their ambition as a virtue, a reflection of the drive I instilled in them, rather than the shallow materialism it has become. My love for my daughter has been a beautiful, heavy cloak that has kept me from feeling the chill of her indifference. This Christmas I was determined to connect. I called Brooke a week in advance. "I'll be there around 2 on Christmas Day," I said. "And I'm bringing my sweet potato pie." "Oh, that's great, Mother," she had replied, her voice distracted, distant. "The caterers are handling everything, but I'm sure we can find a little space for it." Caterers. Of course. Christmas dinner was no longer a family meal but a catered event. So I held on to hope. On Christmas Eve I went to the grocery store to buy the yams and the spices. The store was bustling, filled with a festive chaos. As I stood in the checkout line, my eyes fell on a display for the Georgia lottery. The grand prize was $10 million. On a whim, a small, uncharacteristic impulse, I added a single ticket to my purchase. It felt like a silly, frivolous thing to do, a small deviation from my orderly, predictable life. I tucked it into a side pocket of my purse and thought no more of it. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke early. The aroma of cinnamon, nutmeg, and baking yams filled my quiet house, a scent that for years had meant family and celebration. I took my time carefully packing the pie into a carrier. I put on my favorite cashmere sweater and a string of pearls. I was determined to be a mother visiting her child, not a nuisance at a catered affair. I drove the hour from my historic Atlanta neighborhood to the sprawling, manicured suburbs of Alpharetta. The houses grew larger, newer, the spaces between them wider. As I pulled into their long driveway, my heart was full of a quiet, determined hope. I would see my grandchildren Chloe and Noah. I would share my pie. We would for one afternoon be a family. I carried the pie to the front door, the lottery ticket completely forgotten in my purse, a tiny paper secret I didn't even know I was keeping. The front door swung open before I had a chance to ring the bell. Brooke stood there, not with a welcoming smile, but with a look of flustered, panicked stress. She was dressed in a cream-colored silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to be. The house behind her was not a home filled with the warm chaos of Christmas. It was a stage set. White-gloved waiters bustled past, carrying trays of champagne flutes. A string quartet was playing softly in the corner of the living room. And everywhere there were strangers. People in expensive clothes laughing a little too loudly, their faces unfamiliar to me. "Mother," Brooke said, her voice a low, urgent hiss. She took the pie carrier from my hands and passed it to a waiter without a glance. "You're here." "Merry Christmas, darling," I said, leaning in for a hug that she deftly sidestepped. "We have a bit of a situation," she said, her eyes darting nervously over my shoulder towards a group of guests. "Mark's new boss from the San Francisco office is here, the one we've been trying to impress for months. And his wife, she has a severe and I mean life-threatening nut allergy. The caterer used almond flour in some of the hors d'oeuvres and we just found out. We have to be so careful. The air, the cross-contamination, it's a whole thing." I looked at her confused. "Oh my," I said. "Well, my pie has pecans in the crust." "Exactly," she said, seizing on my words with a palpable sense of relief. It's too risky to have you at the main table. We can't take any chances. It would be a disaster." I stood there on her marble-floored entryway, a guest in my own daughter's home, and I felt a cold, sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. This was not about an allergy. This was an excuse, a flimsy, transparently cruel lie designed to solve a problem. And the problem I was beginning to understand was me. "I see," I said, my voice quiet, betraying none of the storm that was beginning to gather inside me. "What would you like me to do?" Her face brightened, relieved that I was not making a scene. "Well," she said, "I had an idea. So that you can still be here and enjoy the wonderful food. Mark can bring a plate out to you. In your car. You'll be comfortable, you can listen to the radio and we'll know that everyone inside is safe. It's really the only solution. To eat Christmas dinner. Alone. In my car. In the driveway of my own daughter's house." The humiliation of it was so profound, so breathtaking in its casual cruelty, that I couldn't even form a response. I simply nodded, a slow, numb gesture. "Great," she said, her smile now genuine. "You're such a good sport, Mother." She ushered me back out the door into the cold December air. A few minutes later, Mark appeared, carrying a heavy porcelain plate laden with food, covered with a silver cloche. He was wearing a pained, apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Althea, I am so sorry about this," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "It's just been one of those days. Here you go. The fillet is fantastic." He handed me the plate and a set of heavy silverware wrapped in a linen napkin. The absurdity of it was almost comical. I was being served a 5-star meal like a stray animal. He scurried back inside, eager to return to his party, to his important boss, leaving me alone in the driveway. I sat there in the driver's seat of my 10-year-old sedan, the engine off, the silence deafening. Through the large, brightly lit windows of the house, I could see the party in full swing. I could see the string quartet playing. I could see the waiters circulating with trays. I could see my grandchildren Chloe and Noah, looking beautiful in their Christmas outfits, their faces etched with a discomfort they were too young and too intimidated to voice. And I could see my daughter Brooke laughing, holding a glass of champagne, a perfect hostess in her perfect house, my absence not even a footnote in her perfect day. I ate a few bites of the fillet. It was cold. A wave of grief and shame so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. I felt tears welling in my eyes, hot and angry. I would not cry. I, Dr. Evelyn Reed, would not be reduced to weeping in a driveway. I needed a distraction, something, anything to focus on besides the crushing weight of this moment. My hand fumbled in my purse, searching for a tissue. My fingers brushed against a small, crisp piece of paper. The lottery ticket. On a desperate, nonsensical impulse, I pulled it out. I found a quarter in the console's change holder. In the dim, fading light of the winter afternoon, I began to scratch. The metallic scent of the gray dust filled the small space. I scratched off the first number. It matched. Then the second. It matched. My heart began to beat a little faster. The third. A match. The fourth. A match. The fifth. A match. My hands were trembling. I scratched off the final number, the Powerball. It was 17. The number on my ticket was 17. I stared at the small piece of paper. It couldn't be. It was impossible. I checked the numbers again, my eyes tracing the small printed digits. They were all there. A perfect match. The grand prize. $10 million. I sat there in the cold silence of my car holding a winning lottery ticket worth $10 million. A plate of cold, expensive food on the seat beside me. A slow, strange feeling began to bubble up from the depths of my grief. It was not joy. It was not excitement. It was a cold, clear, and utterly ferocious sense of power. They had banished me to the driveway thinking I was nothing. They had no idea that in this cold, lonely car, I had just become the most powerful person they had ever known. The game had just changed, and I was about to write a new set of rules. I did not go back into the house. I finished my meal in a state of calm, almost surreal detachment. The filet mignon, once cold and tasteless, now seemed insignificant. The laughter from the house, once a source of painful exclusion, was now just distant, irrelevant noise. I placed the empty plate and the silverware neatly back on the tray, got out of my car and left it on the front porch. I did not ring the bell. I did not say goodbye. I simply got back in my car, the $10 million ticket now tucked safely in the zippered compartment of my purse, and drove away. My retreat was not a retreat at all. It was a strategic withdrawal. I drove home to my quiet house in Collier Heights, the familiar streets a comfort. I did not celebrate. I did not call a friend. I did what I have always done in moments of great importance. I made a plan. I spent that Christmas night not in sleepless excitement, but in quiet, methodical preparation. I laid out my best suit, a classic navy blue wool crepe. I gathered my identification, my social security card, my bank documents. I was preparing not for a celebration, but for a transaction, the most significant one of my life. The next morning, December 26th, while my daughter and her family were likely sleeping in, recovering from their perfect party, I was driving downtown. The Georgia Lottery headquarters was a large, impersonal state building. I walked in at 9 o'clock just as they opened. The woman at the counter looked at me, a well-dressed elderly black woman, and probably assumed I was there to cash in a $5 winner. "I believe I have a winning ticket to claim," I said, my voice calm and even. I handed her the ticket. She scanned it. Her eyes widened. She scanned it again. Without a word, she picked up her phone and made a quiet call. A few minutes later, a man in a suit, the director of claims, emerged from a back office. He led me to a private room. The process took over an hour. There were forms to sign, identity checks to be made. They were all stunned by my composure. They likely expected tears or shouts of joy. They saw none. I was Dr. Evelyn Reed, the former dean of students. I was handling an administrative matter. When they asked how I wanted the payout, I did not hesitate. "The lump sum, please," I said. By noon, the transaction was complete. I walked out of that building with a receipt confirming that millions of dollars were being transferred into my bank account. My life had been irrevocably altered. My first move was not to go home. Home was a place of memories, of a life that was now over. I needed a new base of operations. I drove straight to Midtown, to the Four Seasons Hotel. I walked up to the front desk. "I would like to book the Royal Suite," I said to the concierge. "For how long?" he asked. "Indefinitely," I replied. The suite was breathtaking. It was larger than the entire first floor of my house, with panoramic views of the city, a grand piano in the living room, and a bathroom clad in floor-to-ceiling marble. It was a world away from the cold driveway of my daughter's home. I stood at the vast window looking down at the city I had called home for 50 years, and I felt a sense of profound, quiet power. My second move was an act of reclamation. I called the hotel's spa. "I would like to book a full day of treatments," I said. "The works. Massage, facial, manicure, pedicure. Everything you have." For the next 6 hours, I was wrapped in warm towels, massaged with scented oils, and attended to with a gentle reverence. It was more than just a spa day, it was a purification ritual. I was sloughing off the humiliation of the day before layer by layer until I felt like myself again, but a newer, stronger version. That evening, I sat in a plush silk robe in my magnificent suite, a room service menu on the table beside me. The city lights twinkled below like a carpet of scattered diamonds. I picked up my phone. I scrolled to my daughter's name, Brooke. I looked at her picture for a long moment. Then with a steady, deliberate finger I pressed block this caller. A small confirmation box appeared. Are you sure? It asked. Oh sure. I did the same for her husband, Mark. I did the same for their home landline. The silence that followed was not an empty silence. It was a silence of my own making. A silence filled with power and possibility. They had made me eat alone in my car. They had decided I was not worthy of a place at their table. I had just decided they were no longer worthy of a place in my life. The cutoff was complete. The next phase of my plan could begin. For the next few days, I lived in a state of luxurious, strategic seclusion. I ordered room service, read novels, and had long conversations with my financial advisor, mapping out the new reality of my wealth. All the while, I imagined the growing annoyance in Alpharetta. My daughter and son-in-law, accustomed to my immediate availability, would be stewing, irritated that I wasn't answering their calls. They would assume I was sulking, engaging in a petty, elderly pout over the Christmas dinner slight. They had no concept of the scale of the tectonic shift that had occurred beneath their feet. On the third day, my plan moved from the defensive to the offensive. I made 2 calls. The first was to a high-end white-glove moving company, the kind that specializes in art and antiques. The second was to a luxury car service. That afternoon, a gleaming black Escalade, complete with a uniformed driver, pulled up to the Four Seasons. I emerged, dressed in a new, impeccably tailored pantsuit. I had a personal shopper from Neiman Marcus deliver to my suite. I was no longer a grandmother driving her old sedan. I was a woman of means, and I was about to make a withdrawal. We drove to Alpharetta, a silent, powerful procession. The Escalade was followed by a large, pristine moving truck. We pulled up to the sprawling new construction house. I saw Brooke's face appear in an upstairs window, her expression one of pure, baffled confusion. I did not go to the door. I simply stood on the manicured lawn as the movers, armed with a detailed, itemized list I had prepared, rang the bell. Mark answered, his face a mask of irritation that quickly morphed into shock as he saw the scene on his lawn. "Mother? What is this? What's going on?" he asked, his voice sputtering. "I've come to collect my things," I said calmly, my voice even and cool. The movers, professional and efficient, entered the house. They did not touch the furniture Brooke and Mark had bought. They did not touch their electronics or their clothes. They moved with surgical precision, retrieving only the items of deep sentimental value that I had given them over the years. From the living room, they took the baby grand piano I had bought for Brooke when she had shown a fleeting interest in lessons as a girl. From the hallway, they carefully unhooked the series of framed, hand-colored botanical prints I had gifted them as a housewarming present. From the dining room, they packed my grandmother's silver and the set of heirloom china that had been in my family for 3 generations. The most painful part for them was the children's rooms. The movers went upstairs and returned with the beautiful hand-stitched quilts I had spent a winter making for Chloe's and Noah's beds. They returned with the complete leather-bound set of classic children's books I had bought for their library. And they returned with the baby albums, the ones I had painstakingly assembled, filled with photographs of their first steps, their first birthdays, their first days of school, a history I had curated and which I was now repossessing. Brooke finally came running out of the house, her face a mess of tears and rage. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "These are our things. They're the children's things." I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "My dear," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of a final judgment. "These are not things. They are extensions of my love. And if I am not welcome in your life, then neither is my love." I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to my driver. He opened the door of the Escalade for me. As I settled into the plush leather seat, I watched the last of my memories being loaded into the truck. I had just performed a radical act of emotional archaeology, excavating my own heart from a place where it was no longer valued. That weekend I executed the final public act of this chapter. I called the maitre d' at Bacchanalia, Atlanta's most celebrated and exclusive restaurant. I would like to book the entire main dining room for Saturday evening, I said. The dinner was billed as a post-Christmas celebration of friendship. I invited my true family, my circle of friends from my Collier Heights neighborhood, the deans and professors I had worked with for decades at Spelman, the elders from my church. 40 people in all. The restaurant was filled with flowers, the champagne flowed freely, and the sound of genuine warm laughter filled the air. I stood at the head of the long, beautifully set table and raised a glass. To friendship, I said. To the family we choose and to the comfort of a place at the table. I knew the story of the dinner would reach Alpharetta within hours. The Atlanta society I was a part of was a small, interconnected world. Brooke and Mark would hear about it from their friends, from the very people they were so desperate to impress. They would hear about the lavish menu, the joyful atmosphere, and the radiant, powerful woman at the center of it all. They had made me eat alone in a car. I had responded by buying out the best restaurant in the city and celebrating my life without them. The message I knew would be received loud and clear. The news of the moving truck and the Bacchanalia dinner party rippled through the affluent suburbs of North Atlanta with the speed of a wildfire. Brooke and Mark, who had built their entire social identity on a foundation of perceived success and good taste, were suddenly the subjects of hushed, speculative gossip. Their friends, the same people who had attended their Christmas party, were now calling them, their voices a mixture of feigned concern and salacious curiosity. "Is everything all right with your mother? We heard she threw the most incredible party." The humiliation was exquisite, and it was delivered not by me, but by the social circle they so desperately coveted. Their annoyance at my silence quickly morphed into a full-blown panic. They now understood that this was not a simple sulk. This was a strategic, calculated campaign, and they were hopelessly outmaneuvered. While they were reeling, I was making my next move. I met with my lawyer, Franklin Hayes, in the sun-drenched living room of my penthouse suite at the Four Seasons. "I need to rewrite my will, Franklin," I said. Immediately. The new will was a masterpiece of strategic philanthropy. It did not, as my children might have feared, disinherit them in favor of a distant cousin. It did something far more profound. I instructed Franklin to draft the charter for a new charitable foundation, to be established upon my death, called the Grandmother's Grace Foundation. Its mission would be to provide financial grants, housing assistance, and legal support to grandmothers who had stepped in to raise their grandchildren. The sole beneficiary of my entire estate, the lottery winnings, the proceeds from the sale of my home, my art, my investments, would be this foundation. My children, Brooke and Mark, and by extension their children, were not mentioned at all. They had been legally and completely erased from my legacy. "And I want the news of my intentions to be made public," I told Franklin. "Not as a petty leak, but as a story of a new philanthropic endeavor in our city." Franklin understood completely. He contacted a respected journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a woman known for her thoughtful pieces on local philanthropy. The story that ran the following Sunday was not gossip. It was a celebration. The headline read, "Beloved former Spelman Dean Dr. Evelyn Reed wins $10 million lottery, dedicates future fortune to grandmothers in need." The article was glowing. It portrayed me as a civic saint, a woman of substance and vision who, blessed with a sudden windfall, had chosen to use it to support some of the most vulnerable members of the community. It mentioned my new penthouse, my recent travels, but framed it all as the well-deserved enjoyment of a woman who was planning to give it all away in the end. Brooke and Mark would have read that article over their Sunday morning coffee. They would have seen the smiling, dignified photograph of me. And they would have finally, truly, understood the scale of their miscalculation. It wasn't just about a few sentimental objects or a dinner party. It was about millions of dollars, a future of absolute financial security, that had just vanished before their eyes. Their strategy shifted instantly. The angry, confused silence was replaced by a desperate, cloying, and utterly transparent campaign of reconciliation. The blocked numbers meant nothing. They resorted to emails, to couriered letters, to messages sent through mutual acquaintances. The first email from Brooke was a masterwork of feigned remorse. "Dearest mother," it began. "My heart is broken. I've been trying to reach you, worried sick. I know Christmas was a terrible misunderstanding. I was so stressed, so worried about Mark's boss, I behaved monstrously. I can't eat, I can't sleep, thinking of how I must have hurt you. Please, please find it in your heart to forgive your foolish daughter. All I want is my mother back." Mark's was more direct, appealing to a pragmatism he thought I would respect. "Evelyn," he wrote, "I am profoundly sorry for my part in the events of Christmas Day. There is no excuse. We have been trying to reach you to apologize. Your recent decisions, while wonderfully generous, seem rash. We are concerned. We want to sit down and talk as a family to make sure you are being properly advised." Then came the flowers. Dozens of them. Orchids, roses, lilies. My penthouse suite began to look like a funeral parlor. They were gestures not of love but of panic. They were trying to buy their way back into my life, back into the will. I, from the serene comfort of my new home, ignored it all. I instructed the concierge at the hotel to refuse all deliveries. I set up a filter on my email account that sent any message from their addresses directly to a trash folder. I read none of it. I responded to none of it. Their desperate, fawning words were sent out into a void. I was giving them the same silent, absolute rejection they had given me. They were learning what it felt like to be left on the outside, looking in. Their campaign of feigned kindness, met with my impenetrable wall of silence, lasted for 2 agonizing weeks. The flowers wilted. The emails went unanswered. Their panic curdled into a desperate, impotent rage. If they could not win me back with false love, they would try to conquer me with force. Their final, most audacious move was to resort to the law. They hired a team of expensive, aggressive lawyers and filed a lawsuit. It was a petition for an emergency conservatorship. They claimed that I, their beloved mother, had suddenly begun to behave erratically since my minor lottery win. They cited my move to a penthouse, my extravagant spending, and my sudden and inexplicable decision to cut off my loving family as proof that I was no longer mentally competent to manage my own affairs. They were asking the court to declare me mentally incapacitated and to appoint them, my devoted children, as the conservators of my person and my estate. They were trying to have me legally declared a non-person so they could seize control of the fortune they had been denied. The legal battle became an immediate public spectacle, a juicy piece of high society drama for the Atlanta papers. But if they thought they could intimidate me, they had forgotten who I was. I was Dr. Evelyn Reed. I had managed university budgets larger than their annual salaries and had navigated academic politics far more treacherous than a simple courtroom. I was not the victim in this story. I was the dean. The courtroom was my element. On the day of the hearing, I arrived not as a frail, elderly woman, but as the formidable academic I had always been. I wore a sharp, dark purple suit, my posture was perfect and my gaze was steady. Brooke and Mark sat across from me, their faces grim, their lawyers whispering in their ears. Their lawyer began, painting a picture of a confused, vulnerable woman being taken advantage of by fortune and new advisors. He spoke of my sudden, drastic change in behavior. When it was Franklin's turn, he didn't just refute their claims, he systematically dismantled them. He presented my financial records showing decades of prudent management. He presented my recent flawless psychiatric evaluation. And then he brought up Christmas Day. "Dr. Reed," Franklin said, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom. "Could you please tell the court where you ate your Christmas dinner this past year?" I looked directly at the judge. "I ate it in my car," I said, my voice clear and strong. "In my daughter's driveway." A murmur went through the courtroom. Franklin continued, skillfully drawing out the entire humiliating story. The flimsy excuse. The plate of cold food. The sight of my family celebrating inside. And then he delivered the final devastating blow. "And while you were sitting there, Dr. Reed," he asked, "alone in your car, what did you do?" "I scratched off a lottery ticket," I said. "And I discovered that I had won $10 million. The story was electric. The image of this elegant, dignified woman, cast out by her wealthy children, discovering a life-altering fortune in her moment of deepest humiliation was more powerful than any legal argument. It was a narrative of cruelty and poetic justice that was impossible to refute. The media present in the courtroom had their headline. Brooke and Mark visibly shrank in their seats, their faces pale with the horror of public exposure. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, was not impressed with their case. She dismissed the petition for conservatorship with a barely concealed disgust, her closing remarks a thinly veiled rebuke of my children's greed and character. They had not just lost the case, They had lost their reputation, their standing, their last shred of public dignity. My victory was absolute, and my new life began in earnest. I purchased a magnificent penthouse apartment in Buckhead, a beautiful space filled with light and art. My art, the pieces I had reclaimed from their house. I hired a private driver. I traveled. But my greatest joy, my most satisfying act of revenge was ongoing. I began to rebuild my relationship with my grandchildren Chloe and Noah, on my own terms. I would send my driver to their school to pick them up for grandmother weekends. I took them shopping at Phipps Plaza, telling them to buy whatever they wanted. I got them courtside seats at Hawks games, right next to the celebrities. I was showing them a world of generosity, of fun, of unconditional love, a world their parents had denied them. It was a subtle, constant reminder to Brooke and Mark of the life of grace and opportunity they had thrown away for the sake of a perfectly arranged table. But my final act of reclamation was a private one, a journey back to the beginning. My new fortune didn't just buy me a new life in America. It allowed me to reclaim my original one. I purchased a beautiful whitewashed villa overlooking the ocean in my hometown of Cape Coast, Ghana. A place of peace, of history, of home. I am on the terrace of my Atlanta apartment, the city lights twinkling below, but I am on the phone with my cousin in Ghana. We are not talking about lawsuits or inheritance. We are laughing, joyfully discussing the renovations for my Cape Coast home, arguing about the perfect shade of blue for the shutters, the best place to plant a frangipani tree. I have my magnificent new life in America, but I also have my soul's home waiting for me across the sea. I have built a global triumphant peace, a world of my own making, a world that my children can never, ever touch.